Okay, it's just preparing to go live. Still preparing.
To my screen, we're now live on YouTube.
Okay, we are now live.
Shall I get cracking on then?
You can indeed, please do.
Thanks very much, Joe. Welcome everyone. We'll start. We've got a fairly decent sized agenda today. As we've heard, we will take a small comfort break if we go past an hour, but we'll start off with some apologies for absences. Do you have any?
We've received apologies from Councillor Elson of Woking, Councillor Randolph of Elmbridge, and Councillor Turrell of Bracknell Forest.
Thank you very much. And given the recent elections, we may or may not have some new faces. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to welcome any new members to the board. Do we have any new members? I could be wrong.
Suspect I might be a new member.
Hello, Marissa.
Hi, how are you?
And which borough are you from?
I'm from Surrey County Council. I'm cabinet member for environment over there, but I'm also lead borough councillor. So
lovely to meet you.
Nice to see everyone. I'm afraid I will leave at 11 because we've got a county meeting, but I'm looking forward to seeing what this is all about. So thanks.
Lovely to meet you. Anyone else, or are we the usual faces? I will assume so. In which case, we'll crack on with the substantive items. So, minutes of the previous meeting. I think it was the 19th of November. Are we all in agreement that those are in accurate representation of the last meeting? Or any questions? Any issues? Martin, go ahead.
So I was just trying to find an email.
Hands up.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you. No, that I did want to ask a question, which was it was really about the financial discussion we had, in which we said that we shouldn't invest in damaging to the environment investments. I felt the wording in the minutes wasn't strong enough. According to the discussion that we had, I think the consensus was stronger than. I think the wording is fairly, weak. I can't remember. I can't find it at the moment because I'm trying to look at two different screens.
That's quite all right. I tell you what we'll do. I know this topic is likely going to come up at a later agenda item. If you want to write in something specific, you want specifically addressed, then if you could write to us and we'll take a look. But otherwise, why don't we have this discussion, as I suspect will happen again at the agenda item where we discuss the investment portfolio. That's okay. Thank you. But otherwise, everyone happy with the remainder of the minutes, and I'll make a note that there may be some small adjustments necessary in that particular section. I see thumbs up from Jonathan. Great.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. In which case, we take to our first project update, the Strategic Access Management and Monitoring Project Update. Oh, look at that. That was so smooth. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Here we go. Can you hear me now? And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, but it's not maximized. Could you make it full screen, please?
Oh yes, I probably can. Bear with me for a moment. I shall just do a different sort of click, and I'll do with that click and that one. How's that?
Perfect.
Yep.
Excellent.
All yours, Thank you.
Practiced. Thank you very much. Okay, everyone. Well, great to see you today. Thanks everybody for coming along. I'm just going to give you an update on all of the amazing work that the SAM team have been doing since the last time we met in November. I'm just going to go for the highlights because I know we've got lots to talk about today, and we've all busy people and pressures on our time. But I shall wade on in. The big news to share with you is that our wonderful team leader Anne is off and away onto her new project. And so I'm just going to, there we go. And Anne, are you going to come in at this point and say hello?
Hello. Yes, I will do. I want to say thank you to all the board, particularly the longest standing members of the board who've given me a lot of support during the role. really, really proud of how the project's come on over the last 4 years and sad to be leaving, but very excited about the prospect of being able to input into the new DEFRA environmental land management scheme, which is going to be where I'm off to. So yeah, thank you everybody, and yeah, really super proud of where we've gone, and good luck. Ruth's doing a fantastic job at the moment.
Thank you.
So we'll tell you about who's going to be taking over from me now, and I have absolute faith that they'll do a fantastic job for you. So well done, good luck, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne. We're going to miss you hugely, but it's great that Anne's still going to be within Natural England, so we'll be able to tap into her knowledge and wisdom as and when we need to. So the next image I want to show you is some of our wonderful wardens out and about doing their thing. You can see these are the seasonal and the year-round team having an amazing time engaging with people and engaging with nature. I know the first slide was part of our new branding, and here we go. Here is the finished product. This is our new image. One of the things that me joining the team, and thank you very much for thinking that change in structure is a good idea, means that it's freed up Sarah and Michael to do all sorts of amazing things. And this is an illustration of that. Sarah's organised all sorts of changes to the branding and our online presence and our communications. And that's been particularly pertinent, I think, in these interesting times where we can't meet people the way we used to, or we haven't been able to, because of the COVID restrictions. And so our online presence has been really important. And it's great to have had the capacity to ramp up to making the online presence as important as it's become, as I shall show you shortly. This is the inside of that leaflet. So you're probably familiar with this, but we have a marvellous leaflet that tells everybody all about where the SPAs are and where all of the SANGs, the suitable alternative natural green spaces are. One of the great pieces of news to let you know is that last time I met with you, we had 70 SANGs. We have now got 72 SANGs, which is brilliant. And we've got 3 more in the pipeline. So it looks as if we're going to have 75 SANGs next time I see you, but we'll have to watch this space and see how that goes. But the number of SANGs is increasing, which is great. This is a wonderful infographic that Sarah put together to illustrate really the key core message that we try and get across. And it's a really nice visual way of communicating the information. There's lots to take in. There's lots of factors influencing our work, but this is a beautiful, I think, illustration. Nice and simple and easy to understand. And all of this information is on our website, so if anybody wants to go and have a closer look at it, it's all sitting there. The website has gone through a lovely upgrade, so it still looks the same, but the functionality is improved and the content. So we've got images like this. We've also got an amazing wildlife gallery. So we've got lots of species of birds that enjoy the heathland. And when you click on them, you can hear how the bird song sounds. I thought I might try and share that with you, but I was worried about the technology. So I chickened out. But have a look on the website. They're amazing. Another thing that we've done is made the website easy to look at on the phone, because most of the users want to access it using their mobile phone. Or some of them do, certainly, and so now it's nice and easy. We are having a lot more website traffic than we used to, so I know this is in the report, but just to let you know that we've had 70,000 page views in the last year, which is amazing, compared to sort of 47,354 in the previous year. And the most interesting, or the page that gathers the most interest is the green space on your doorstep page, which lets everybody know all about these suitable alternative natural green spaces, those SANGs, which are key to our project, as you know. One of the things that we've found challenging when it comes to engagement is the lack of being able to give over pieces of paper. him up with was having QR codes.
It didn't rain that heavy where I was. It was funny enough when I came left home this morning.
Sorry, can we have everyone's microphones muted while Ruth is giving the presentation, please?
I'm happy to take questions, or if you want me to be talking
No,
about...
I think that was just a bit of background noise. Apologies,
Okay.
Ruth.
Thank you. So we've all got more familiar with the QR codes because of the NHS app, I think. And that has actually enabled people to access the information in a really interesting way. And so all of our wardens now have QR codes, which they can pop on the ground if an individual is interested in getting a leaflet, and then they back away from the QR code, and then the individual can come up and take a photo, and it takes them straight to the website, and then they can download the information. I'm pleased as well about the environmental impact of that. So rather than having paper leaflets, we've got this virtual alternative. So that's really interesting, and it does seem to be going well. The engagement is good. We've also been putting these wonderful leaflet signs out. We normally do a survey of users face to face, asking questions, and because of the restrictions, we haven't been able to do that. So this amazing team with their innovative way of thinking thought, well, let's put some QR codes out for the survey and see what sort of responses we get. And the responses have been really useful and valuable. Daria, are you with us at the moment? I'm going to hand over, I hope, to our amazing data analyst, Dr. Daria. Are you with us, Daria?
There we go. Yes, I am. Thank you, Ruth.
Excellent. So the information that we gathered from the QR code, Daria has been analysing, and she's going to talk us through a little bit of the things that we found out. So here we are. I shall go on to the, and whenever you want me to change slide, Daria, just let me know and I'll click.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Right. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm the data analyst for the project. I would like to illustrate to you some data related to SANG's usage. What I will try to do is to draw some basic comparison between the first SANG survey that the project carried out in 2013 to our last one, this what I call 2021, even though it started in December 2020, as was mentioned. The 2021 is still ongoing, but I will present to you the data from the beginning, so December 2020 to the end of May 2021. The two surveys do differ from each other to some extent. So I thought I would highlight the main differences here because they play an important role in how we interpret the graphs that I will illustrate to you next. So the 2013 survey was carried out during the summer, while the 2021 covered some of the winter months as it started in December. The number of locations in the 2013 survey were also a lot lower than in 2021, 7 to 46. And the main reason for this is the methodology used to collect those data. So the 2013 survey was carried out in person by wardens. So the wardens were there with the form and asked people for a little bit of their time to fill up the form. Whereas Ruth has just mentioned, because of the pandemic, we had to come up with an innovative way to gather the data. And so we used a QR code that was placed at the location or sites where people would scan and fill up the form, and the results will get back to us directly. This obviously led to quite a difference in number of people providing us with data. So we have 216 entries for the 2013 survey, which is already quite a very high number if you think about the effort that it takes for a warden to stop people and ask questions. But obviously, given the nature of the QR code, we have a much larger sample size, which, as I say, is still ongoing, of close to, and now we've passed 600 people. Next slide, Rose, please. So the first comparison that I would like to draw is in the length of visit. In this graph, we have categories of visit lengths on the x-axis, and we have percentage of entries on the y-axis. We have the 2013 data in blue, and we have the 2021 data in orange. So the first thing that I would like to notice here is that in both surveys, most people were on the sang for 30 minutes to an hour. However, the earlier survey, the 2013 one, the blue one, shows that the second most common length of visit was a much shorter one, less than 30 minutes. And there seems to have been some kind of a shift towards longer visits for 2021. As you can see, the second highest column, the orange one, is 1 to 2 hours. I must stress here that the difference in sample size is quite important, and this does not form is not a form of statistical analysis, which I'll carry out for the next meeting. It's just to illustrate. Nevertheless, I think it's quite interesting to see that people seem to use sangs for longer periods, longer visits than before, and therefore it's potentially important to bear this in mind when we think about the importance of the size of the sangs, for example. And as the sangs are there to effectively, as an alternative to the SPAs, it's quite important that people are using sangs for longer visits. Next slide, please, Ruth. Thank you. The second graph that I would like to show to you illustrates the difference in the mode of transport that people used to arrive to sangs. The mode of transport, again, is on the x-axis and the percentages on the y-axis. Again, 2013 is in blue, and the 2021 is in orange. The first thing to notice is that in both surveys, it appeared that most people arrived to sangs on foot. However, you can see that whilst in 2013, almost twice as many people arrived on foot that they did by vehicle, in 2021, it seems to be almost a 50-50 shift. So as many people seem to arrive on foot as they arrive by vehicle. I thought this one could be due to a weather reason, as the 2013 survey was carried out in the summer, while the 2021 had part of the winter months included as well. So I haven't presented it here, so I'm just telling you that when I took out the winter months and considered only mid-March to the end of May, this balance of a vehicle and on foot for 2021 remained. So it seems to be an actual signal rather than just due to the weather. So one of the questions is why could that be? Next slide, please, Ruth. Thank you. And one of the things to look at is how far people have come from their homes to the sangs. As you can see here, once again, on the x-axis is the distance category, ranging from less than 1 kilometer distance from home to the sang to over 10 kilometers. And on the y-axis, percentage, blue for 2013, orange for 2021. And what we can see here is that the absolute majority of people in 2013 came from really quite close to the sang that they were visiting. However, in 2021, the orange bars, you can see that there seems to have been a shift towards people coming from slightly further and further away to visit the sang of choice. This probably leads to the use of cars and vans. This is quite, I think, it's a very interesting result to understand the behavior of people visiting SANGs. It's quite important to bear in mind that the number of sites involved in the two surveys really differ. So this will be one of the main priorities for running formal statistical analysis to see the differences. However, it's quite interesting to see that people are ready to travel from quite good distances to visit a SANG. Next slide, please, Ruth. Thank you. Finally, we have seen how frequently people use the SANGs and how far they come to visit, but why are they there? We can see here illustrated the main reasons for visiting SANGs. On the x-axis, there are the main reasons reported, and on the y-axis, there is a percentage of entries. Again, 2013 is in blue and 2021 in orange. The first thing to notice is that in both surveys, it emerged that dog walking was the main reason for visiting SANGs. However, what I think is quite interesting is that in the later survey, in the 2021 survey, it appears that people are using SANGs for more and more reasons. There's more variety of reasons for visiting SANGs, which include wildlife watching and enjoy scenery. Now, that is very important because we know that people visit SPAs also for the purpose of these activities. So if SANGs can provide a good outlet for this kind of hobbies, then the usefulness of SANGs in terms of what we're trying to achieve is obviously much stronger. Again, I'll run formal analysis on this, but at the moment, I would say it looks like very positive message that SANGs are used quite extensively by many people for a variety of reasons. And people appreciate SANGs. So I think that is a fantastic message. And obviously, I'll have more formal results in the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Daria. So I think that is really interesting to me, the distance that people are wanting to travel to get to a suitable alternative natural green space or a SANG. And I wonder if some of the website activity is an illustration of that. People are looking for places to go. We're providing them with the information, and it's proven to be effective. So that's really brilliant, I think. And also the fact that still the primary usage of the spaces is dog walking. So that leads me very nicely on to talking to you a little bit about Heathland Hounds. So this is
excuse me, Ruth.
Yes.
Ruth, before we move on away from the data, I have raised my hand, and it does relate to the distance travelled.
Oh, yes.
Can I ask a question? Do we think there's a possibility that because the people responding to the survey are now a self-selecting set because they've used QPR codes, that actually implies a demographic shift? And actually what's happening is that you're measuring a different subgroup within the population than you were in 2013, and that could possibly account for some of the differences in the skewing of the data. Is that possibility being taken into consideration?
It's certainly a possibility. I think there are a number of biases potentially in using QR codes, such as people using for a slower paced activity are perhaps more likely to notice a QR code than perhaps runners or cyclists. Is to answer these questions. Actually, we are going to run the QR code parallel to in-person surveys in the summer, and then I'll be able to compare the two. That is absolutely correct, though. There can be a demographic difference in them, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Apart from anything else, you've got to have a phone to be able to QR. So
I think we have a follow-up question from Martin. Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask with regard to the distance travelled, part of the purpose of SANGs, I would have thought, is to try and ensure people don't travel too far, because it's also to help reduce traffic. Or I thought that was possibly one of the purposes. So we shouldn't necessarily welcome the appearance of people travelling from more than 10 kilometres, because that sort of goes against the purpose of a SANG, really. It seems to me.
And I wonder if it might be a reflection of the drive that we're all finding in response to this interesting situation we're all in, to connect with nature, and people are looking for spaces that they can do that responsibly. And to me, that seems like a good news story. But you're absolutely right. The fact that it's, if they just went around the corner, they might find something else. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've walked over every patch of green space near my house many times, trampled it to mud in the winter, certainly. But I did discover new spaces in the process. So
there is also, sorry, Ruth, there's also a slight contradiction with all this, which is that the better your SANG is, the bigger the draw it has. So when you have a SANG that's quite a specialist,
yes, absolutely, we want to go, absolutely.
It creates a bit of a reverse pressure than the one we might want. Is it okay if I take a couple more questions, or you want to carry on with your slides? I think these are probably all relevant to this topic. So
well, let's do it now. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Angus, go ahead, please. I think you're first.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think it probably reflects that some of our SANGs are actually very attractive places in their own right, and you referred to that. It does beg the other question, and it's one I've noticed in Woking, whenever a new SANG comes up on the planning committee, is whether there should be and how big a car park should be. And I wonder if that's something that we should just review. I'm not promoting it particularly, but it does cause an issue if people are parking on the verges and whatever in certain of the SANGs. But perhaps it's the general policy that we do need just to review at some point.
Thank you, Angus. Marissa.
Yeah, just a sort of observation, really. I suppose, I mean, I live very close to a SANG, near to Chobham SANG, actually, but I represent Englefield Green, and on that area, we've got the Crown land, and what we've noticed over the last year is a massive amount of people coming from quite far away, actually, places like Feltham and Hounds and things to park there, and actually the Crown Estate have said to us, we've got too many people, it's destroying the biodiversity and the natural habitats, and we want less people to come. So it's really finding that balance between protecting an area but also encouraging people to come and see it. In regards to, and I also wonder, just connecting that, if some of the people that haven't been able to get to those places have literally Googled to look for other places that they can come and take the dog. Dog ownership's gone up by 1 million over the last year, which is huge. We're now at something like 10.5 million dogs. So there's all these new dog owners out there as well, which is something we have to think about as we're looking to protect the natural habitats too. I'm very pro dog ownership, but I also recognise that dogs out of control and irresponsible dog ownership, all these poo bags hanging on trees and things like that is not a great thing at all. Just in regards to, I mean, this is a tremendous presentation, really positive, and really, really informative as well. But I wonder, we have a website, what are we doing to connect into different other modes of, because a lot of this stuff, I think I'm quite well informed, but there's so much amazing information here. How are we really getting it out to people to show them the benefits of SANGs? Most councillors that I speak to that aren't so sort of connected into the wildlife side of things will see SANGs as a bit of a pain because they're what's stopping development or harnessing it to an extent in their view, whereas actually I see this is such a hugely positive thing. Is there more we can do? Is there things that we can help with in connecting to other modes of communication to get that out to people? Thanks.
I could take that question.
Please do.
Yes, please, Sarah. Thank you.
Hi, it's really nice to meet you. I'm Sarah Bunce. I'm the Communications Officer for the Thames Basin Heath Partnership. We do as much as we possibly can to promote SANGs. There's always more we can do, but we have a website, which I think is the only place where all the SANGs are listed. And as Ruth mentioned, that is the busiest part of our website. We have a team of 12 wardens, well, a bit under that at the moment, but we have 12 wardens on the ground, and they're spreading the word about the SANGs as well. So, particularly talking to visitors on the sensitive habitats. and directing people to Sangs where that's appropriate, and just, you know, spreading the word about Sangs. We have events on Sangs. We have a lovely little booklet we publish that lists all the Sangs. It gets out of date because it's a moving target, but there's 62 listed in a little booklet, which we give away free of charge. We have the Heath and Hounds Facebook group. I don't know if you've come across that. Oh, I see, it's the next slide. We have the Heath and Hounds, which is an amazing Facebook group. It's got over 1,000 local dog walkers as members, and we're always looking to have new members. And, you know, one of their main areas of chit chat on there, and it's a very interactive group, which is a really difficult thing to create, as I'm sure you're aware, on Facebook. So it's a lovely interactive group, and they're always sharing stories about visiting Sangs, and generally talking about Sangs and how much they enjoy them.
Right. And quite a lot of the rest of the
hopefully that gives a flavour.
Quite a lot of the rest of the presentation is about how we try and get the message across to folks, and the different mediums that we're using and avenues. But if you can think of anything we haven't thought of, brilliant. We'll give that a go as well.
I will bring them forward. I'm just wondering what we do around sort of younger people in schools, youth clubs, all of that kind of thing. I expect you've got an answer though.
We're working on it. Absolutely. And I've got slides about that in a minute. So have we got any questions? More questions?
One more from David. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comment really. There's some incredible, this thing started 2009. I was part of it then, and we've come a hell of a long way, and the team have taken us a hell of a long way. And so that we've been advertising through the website places that people could go and visit. And if you put stuff forward that looks attractive, people will visit, whether it's 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers or further. So that's a bit of dynamic you need to think about. But you know, the fact that people are traveling further is probably as a direct result of the amount of work that's gone into the website. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any more questions at this point or comments?
We got Jonathan. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm assuming, you know, we've got more cars arriving, we've got more people arriving. In the future, of course, when we don't have fossil fueled cars, that will no longer be the issue, which will, you know, we're looking to the future. So that should be good news. But I'm assuming that the pandemic anomaly is playing a part here because of the huge number of the increase in dog ownership. And the fact that people are prepared to travel further to get to another Sang so they can look at something else. So it'll be very interesting, assuming we go back to some sort of normality at whatever point, how the stats pan out that year, just to see if they change or they alter in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. So fascinating to see if it's a behavioural change or something that's directly as a result of. Yeah.
I can also see that, you know, people quite rightly are saying, well, we've got huge numbers turning up at 1 or 2 of the Sangs. And then the next comment was, you know, how are we getting the information out to the people? Well, of course, one basically moves the other along. The more people find out about it, the more people want to come. I'm all for people coming, but I can imagine we might have to address numbers and parking at a later date.
Yeah. I
think Jonathan might be suggesting you do just do a bit of a poorer job, please, on it, so that less people know. Maybe if you could just do a little bit worse, that'd be, I think. But no, joking aside, I think this is it's a very interesting point at the heart of this, which is the inherent contradiction of the two elements that we're trying to work on, which is on the one hand we're maintaining these very special places, but the better job we do of maintaining and looking after them and enhancing them, the more people want to come, and then the more in danger it becomes. So it's a struggle that we have to balance out, and there isn't easy answers. I think as comments have mentioned, a number of people have mentioned that the pandemic has skewed results, and actual good decision making at this point is very difficult, because how much of moving forward and looking forward is influenced by just last year or the last 2 years, and how much of it is an actual trend that was already happening pre-pandemic. And so I think we just have to monitor things very carefully. I'll take a couple more comments. Marina, do you want to respond, or do you want to wait for Martin to make a comment before coming in?
I just wanted to expand on the previous comment, which I thought I totally agree with. Thank you. I think we should also think about, I was wondering on the survey, when it goes out, are we asking questions regarding the effect of the pandemic? Because I think going forward, you'll find more people will be working from home, or there's going to be a hybrid way of working. So we're going to have a few days at work and a few days at home. Therefore, less people will be doing these long commutes into London or other places of work. They've got more time on their hands. They've now recognised that there is outdoor space because they need it. They're enjoying it, and they've connecting to the outdoor space with their families and for their health. And I don't think the phenomenon of, you know, finding our sangs, thankfully, will go away. I think they're going to be more and more used, and I'd like to see if you could. I don't know, get a little bit of survey backgrounds on that, you know, are you working from home question, or because, you know, if there is a large amount of people who have now changed their working environments, that would be quite interesting. So I think it will be, I think they found their sangs. Thank you.
Absolutely. And one of the things we're trying to do is make the survey concise so that it's easy. You know, if you get a survey and you've got question after question after question, people abandon it. So
Yeah.
we're trying to capture what we think is the most pertinent information. But it would be fascinating to find out exactly what's driving folks and how the behavioural change is going to impact.
Yeah, and I think you're almost certainly right, Marina, that we will see some continuation of some of these trends we've seen, but it'll be interesting to see how much that is. I know certainly from the number of industries that I'm familiar with that well, and my generation, shall we say, are very reluctant to return to the old ways. Spending 2 hours on a train every day is not something that I think anyone wants to get back to. Martin, and then I'm going to move us on if that's okay. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, it's just a quick question, really. Does the survey include a question, what prompted you to come to this particular sang?
It's quite hard to capture because I think the answer will be open-ended.
Sometimes
I suspect
it's useful to have open-ended.
As a potential final box, as a sort of a free input option. Ruth, I can see you thinking through the implications of that already. But what do you think?
Can we do that? We can have a look at that.
How do we do that? Yeah.
I think it's something that in a sort of a face-to-face interaction, it's something that you could perhaps capture, and maybe a free text box. We can explore that idea. I think, Dario, can we?
Yes, we can. Yes, we are capturing the reason why they are there at that time. We do ask, where else have you considered? But
may I suggest that the best option might be, how did you hear about this sang? And then give them option of websites, word of mouth, and something like that, which is a bit more easy to.
Yeah, sounds good.
To put it into various
what I was trying to get at was they might have driven past 2 other sangs to get to that one. So why did they come to this one rather than one of the other ones?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that's important information.
Fair enough. Thank you, Martin. All right, Ruth, back to you.
Okay.
Tell us more about the dogs.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So I'm aware that we're all there's lots of pressures on our time. I've got loads of really, really positive stuff to tell you about. I don't want to whiz through it too quickly, but I don't want to keep you for too long. So let's see how we go. Let me know if I'm going too fast or if I'm going too slow, but we'll see where we go. So Heathland Hounds is this amazing group that was set up in order to help to educate dog owners on the impact that their lovely canine companions can have on the SPAs. We've currently got 1,186 members, and it's a really active group, and they're really, really useful to us because we can sense check some of ideas with them. They help to percolate our message to other dog owners and dog walkers. One of the really positive things is the Canine Fire Patrol. I'm going to talk about wildfire quickly in a minute, but I think this is fantastic. So your canine companion can become an ambassador and get a tabard and begin to spread the message even further about the risks of wildfire to our amazingly delicate spaces. The other photo on the screen there is before we'd even heard of COVID-19, when we all thought Corona was a beer, but it's an illustration, I think, really nicely of the branding message that we're going through. So Heath and Hounds have their own identity, and they are part of the Thames Basin Heaths, and you will see that reflected in the colours that we use as we go through the various messages. One of our ways of connecting with people is Heath Week, which is an amazing week-long exhibition of a wide variety of events. So we've got it running this year from the 24th to 30th of July. Sarah is the driver of this. She's made it all happen. It's amazing. We'll be doing loads and loads of different activities. It's a mixture of virtual and actual, and it's looking good for us to be able to do some very carefully controlled events with individuals, which will be terrific. There's loads, all the information's on the website. So if you want to know more about Heath Week, do come and have a look at our website. But here's some more lovely individuals doing some painting, which I think is fantastic. Another arm of our way of communicating is our wonderful education officer, Michael, is really focused on engaging with as many people as we possibly can. So this is one of our original, there's Michael, looking very smart. So we have online Heathland resources, and the intention is for people to be able to come to the website and get lots of information in a very easily digestible format. We have been doing virtual Heathland education sessions to schools groups and residents associations and anybody that wants us, so that we can begin to engage and communicate even further how incredibly special this landscape is. Michael recently did a Zoom session with a local school, and the whole school, they were ages year 3 to 6, and they made some posters. And the one I particularly love is the one on the top left there saying, "Birds in danger, stay on the path." Really simple message, really great. That one got it. It's delicious. And these posters are actually now on site on Hallville Common. And Rachel, the senior warden there, and Michael have both made videos thanking the children for their efforts in creating them. But they didn't stop at posters. They also got really creative about different ways of crafting a nightjar. So we've got drawings, we've got bird boxes, all sorts of things. And we have got the joy, which is a nightjar cake. So that's at top left there, you've got nightjar cake sat on a biscuit nest, which I think is delicious. Well, I'm sure it was delicious. And we've got Lego and just engaging people. And the whole emphasis is trying to embed Heathland into the curriculum within the schools, so that it's just part of, there's so much to learn from it, that it's part of their educational experience. Another really exciting thing is a citizen science project, and I might need Daria's input at this point as well, but Silver Studded Blues have come out this week. We saw our first one on the team Tuesday, I think, and yesterday we launched this, or was it today? Anyway, not live now is the citizen science initiative to capture sightings of this wonderful butterfly, because it's such an amazing creature. Do you want to say anything about that at the moment, Daria, or are we all up to?
Just that we are working with butterfly conservation and local partners to get recordings of this declining species.
So that's really great, and educating people, getting them involved, getting them connected to the landscape is just, I think it's a brilliant initiative. So we'll let you know more about the numbers next time, I think. Okay. We touched very briefly on wildfire, and we all know it's a huge issue. The website has lots of resources that people can come and use. We had a recent meeting with the Watch Commander of the Wildlife and Rural Affairs Partnership, and from Surrey Fire Rescue Service, and they, in response to some of the events over half term, are planning to go into schools, and their message is focused on general fire awareness, whereas our message is quite specific to the Heathland. So they're going to take our message with them into the schools, and there's links on their website to our information, and I think that's a really positive and interesting change. way of just getting the information out there, that it has a huge impact, obviously, as we know. And we're doing everything that we can to try and educate folks into the dangers of it. Because we had the awful fire on Horsell Common, and that's the devastating result. So what we're trying to do is enable people to understand the implications of their actions. So a key message for us at this particular time of year especially is welfare awareness. And so at the moment we've got consistent signage displayed across the entire SPA for the first time. Again, it's wonderful. Sarah's wonderful work. That's what it looks like. And we've got the fire risk fire and the ground nesting bird signs. They're both out there. This is our warden Nikki putting the extreme fire risk signs out. It's pretty serious because it's a serious topic. And then we've got lots of wardens looking very smiley because we'll be able to educate people about the importance of ground nesting birds. Another sign that we use is this one, which is just a very simple way of trying to explain to people what we would like them to do. We're trying to communicate with folks that at a glance that might not read English, that this is how it's best to use the space. So the feedback we're getting is good. We've had lots of consultation about the creation of the signs. It's really great that we're getting a unified message across the area, because that really helps. You know, when you get a complicated difference of information, which one do you go for? So trying to keep it simple. Okay, so more information to let you know. I think the last time I saw you, we hadn't had the bird data in yet. I mean, all of this is about the birds, isn't it? That's the focus, really. And so we have had the bird data in, and it's really positive. They have all increased, which is brilliant. And there's more detail, lots more information about that if you want it, but I'm aware for time purposes, I'm just going to keep going, if that's all right with folks. Is that okay? We were a bit, it's going to be interesting to see what the impact of the pandemic and the extra footfall is going to be. We had this spike in usage in May of last year. And it'll be interesting to see if that has had an impact. But we'll share the results of our information as soon as we have it. I wanted to just share this next slide with you because I didn't understand how misunderstood the nightjar was over time. And it turns out that it has had all sorts of interesting names. It hasn't been popular in previous times, but we know better now. I thought that was really interesting. Another interesting thing that I found out is that the paleobotanist did some research on the Heath and discovered that we have had the heathland there for 10,000 years, which I think is quite phenomenal. Okay, I'm going to move on to recruitment news next, if that's okay. So last time we saw you, this was the team. All of our lovely smiley faces there. Now, this is the team. There we all are. Out spreading the message as much as we can. The recruitment process was interesting, and obviously trying to recruit and induct people virtually was fun. But this is our first virtual meeting. So there we all are, spreading the message and getting the joy across. As you know, Anne is leaving us. But we'll do our best to be strong and brave and carry on. And we do have a new team leader, and it's wonderful, Victoria. Some of you may know Victoria already. She wasn't able to come and join us today, but she will be with us next time, which is really good. And it brings me on to, I think, the question that I wanted to ask. We would like to do a little bit of a change in structure of the team because we're finding that the pressure on the team leader is pretty impressive, isn't it, Anne? I mean, you've got to do loads. So this is the structure at the moment. There would be an impact in salary costs from the bit of the change, but at the moment, this is where we are. And what we would like to do is, I'll go back. At the moment, the current model gives us 5 year-round wardens, and we've currently got 3 in post. So I'm needing to recruit for 2 individuals to come and join us. What I'd like to do is have one of them be a year-round warden and one of them be a senior warden and take on some of the responsibilities of the team leader role, so that we have got some succession planning and a nice career path for wardens. So I think I've got a little slide here. The benefits of the changes would be nice career path. It would aid retention, I think, and of staff and of knowledge, and also give us succession planning and cover for the holidays. So that's the end of me talking, but that was my question to you. Would you be happy with this change in the structure of the team?
Thank you very much, Ruth. Before I forget, a farewell to Anne, but a best of luck in whatever comes next. I wish you all the best. I'll open up. So thoughts. Angus, your hand's shot up, so you go ahead.
Sorry, Chairman, you got in ahead of me, but I think we should actually record our thanks to Anne, and especially those of us who've been on the board from the start, for her great work and enthusiasm, and to wish her well.
Yes, thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, Ruth's proposed structure changes. David, go ahead. You're muted, my friend.
It'd be good if we saw the numbers, because at the moment I've got the benefits rather than what the cost increases are.
It's actually going to be a saving. Because what we're suggesting, what I'm suggesting that we do is we, rather than having 7 seasonal wardens, we just have 6. And the recruitment round so far has yielded 6 the last 2 years. And so we know that we can function very well with 6. And so if we take out 1 seasonal warden and effectively pop that money onto the role of the lead advisor, it actually saves the project some money. When I was putting the figures together, there are a lot of factors involved in the sort of budgeting and the finances. So what I did was I looked at Natural England's salary costs, and we know that they're not the highest payers in the world, but we love our jobs, so that's fine. And I just made it very simple, and at these people on this level, I didn't include Stephen because he's just our advisor. It was just us, and very simply, all of us full-time for a whole year, how much does that cost? And so at the moment, what we actually cost is that much. So 450, 730 and 67p apparently. The budgeted cost is 45. And that's a really, really brilliant model because it's true. As we look at the finances over the last decade or so, the budgets have been absolutely spot on. So the sort of variations in some people being part-time, some people leaving, recruitment delays, those sorts of things, that's represented in the costs. So with the new structure, rather than that model, the actual cost in that way, so this many people on this level, full-time for a whole year, would be 441, which is a saving of £9,000, which I know isn't a lot, but it's still significant.
It's not the way the world is moving at the moment, so I think that you've managed to push water uphill. I mean, it's something that I personally would approve. I would like to make one comment. There have been a number of the team who have moved on, have gone through this process, and it seems to me, and you can tell me I'm wrong, that this is a great training ground for people to move on further into all sorts of ecological and interesting areas, and it's a side, you know, this is one side of the Thames Basin Heaths activities that none of us ever thought would be it's a very pleasant unintended consequence. So, well done. I'm totally supportive of the change proposals.
Thank you, David. And I think that I echo your comments there. It's succession planning is really important, but actually there's probably this is a part of a larger succession planning that isn't captured by just teams you've got, and the ability to grow these teams and release them into the wild with the experience to take on even more is absolutely fantastic. And there's a huge demand. Let's face it. You know, there's other SANG areas and regions which are desperate for more staff and even, you know.
Yeah, and I did find it interesting that the template that
So for what it's worth, I'm also chucking in my support, especially as you've somehow managed to improve the structure and reduce costs, which is, I think, I've not come across that one before normally, but I'll take it where I can. Martin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to join in, say that I also I support the idea, and also to say that thank you to Anne, and that it's good to see that we're getting somebody to replace the team leader who's got familiarity with the project. So Victoria was a warden back when I was a warden, so it's she knows the project well. So that's excellent.
I'm so relieved. I couldn't be more delighted.
Brilliant. I don't see any other hands up, so I will take your any lack of further comments as agreement with the proposal. So speak now or forever hold your silence.
And shall I stop sharing my screen?
I think that's yes. Thank you. That's probably that's perfect. Thank you for that, Ruth.
Pleasure.
I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. I'm just going to do a couple double check just in case I've missed someone, because that would be rude. Nope, I don't see anyone. In which case, thanks. Thank you very much, Daria and Ruth. That was perfect. And we'll take us our next item, which is the Hearts, Rushmore and Surrey Heath SPA mitigation project update.
Thank you. I will attempt to share my screen. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. Is everyone able to see that okay?
Looks good.
Good, thank you. Right, I'm here today to give you all an update on the Hart Rushmore Surrey Heath SPA mitigation project. I want to just start by introducing myself. I did give a presentation to you all on this project probably a year and a half ago, roughly. My name's Anna Lucas. I'm employed as the Principal Planning Officer at Rushmore Borough Council. I was seconded to manage this project starting in 2018. After a year of running the project, I did go on maternity leave. So I suppose just a bit of a warning. I've recently come back. The project concluded at the beginning of this year and I returned from maternity leave in April. So I will do my best to answer any questions. Anything I can't answer, I will need to take away and come back to you. So we're now in a position to share the project report and the summary of the findings, and the plan following this meeting is to formally publish the project report on the 3 authority websites, along with a number of background studies that sit behind the project report. I'll just go over what I'm going to cover today. So I'll just kind of give a brief overview of the project for those that haven't previously heard one of either mine or Miranda's presentations who was covering the project. I'm going to just set out the mitigation options that the project evaluated, and then go through the summary of the findings, and talk a bit about the project recommendations, and then finally there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. So the project overview, it was a project initiated by Rushmore Borough Council due to the challenges that we found in identifying SANG as part of the preparation of our last local plan, but also a recognition that there was going to be even bigger challenges at the point where we would need to do a local plan review in the future. So the decision was made to be proactive and look at what we could do if we were unable to identify SANG in the future. The decision was made to run this as a joint project between Hart, Rushmore and Surrey Heath, who form a housing market area. And we invited Natural England to form part of the project board. It was funded by MHCLG as part of the Joint Working Fund, and the overall aim was to seek to identify complementary alternative avoidance and mitigation measures. I thought it was worth just reiterating some of the project aims, but also talk a bit about the approach that we took as well. So ultimately, what we wanted to be able to do was provide robust evidence to demonstrate whether an alternative mitigation strategy or approach existed in a scenario where no further SANG can be identified within a particular local authority area. So we went into this with an open mind in terms of it could be that we would be pulling together evidence at the end of the project that demonstrated that there weren't any alternatives. And obviously that still had a benefit in terms of if we came to a point, or any local authority come to a point where they can't identify further SANG, we obviously have the evidence to say that we can't find alternative SANG, but also we have looked and there is no other alternatives available to provide mitigation. It wasn't intended to be an evaluation of the existing approach, and we were clear on that from the beginning and throughout. As I say, we are publishing a project report which really provides an overview of the evidence that has been collected through the project, and behind it sit a number of background studies. These are listed at the beginning of the report, I think something like page 3. Some of these were prepared in-house and really just provide some background information to the SPA and to what's happened to date. And then there are some pieces of evidence that have been prepared by consultants. I think it's important to emphasise, obviously, the conclusions that we've come to and the recommendations are based on the evidence either available already or that we have been able to collect as part of the project. You know, it's a time limited project. You know, we had a set budget. We were looking at a very broad range of options. We wanted to be comprehensive, and I'll come on to talk about that. But obviously, you know, we could collect the evidence that we were able to in the time and within budget. It doesn't discount further evaluation. And again, when I come on to talk about the findings, there are options where the conclusion has been that we're unable to establish whether it could be an alternative at this stage, but further work would need to be undertaken in the future. The other thing that we were clear on as well is this really was a technical piece of work. So any decisions that were going to be or are going to be made as a result of the findings of this project, which exercise the functions of a planning authority or competent authority, are obviously a matter for each authority. We are merely, you know, putting these forward as recommendations. So the options that we considered, there were 11 different options, and these are grouped into 4 categories. I think, as I've said before, when I presented to this group, a number of the options had been looked at before. So there wasn't anything particularly new or radical that we were considering. Some of them are taken from a review we did of mitigation strategies that are used for other SPAs around the country, and sort of perhaps a slightly different approach to the approach that we're currently taking. So they were grouped into 4 different groups. The first was looking really at the principle of SANG and whether that could be delivered in a slightly different way. So basically the kind of ultimate, is there different ways that we could attract users away from the SPA? The next group was looking at habitat restoration on the SPA, which is something that has previously been considered a number of years ago. The third group was looking at access management and whether there was the option, if an authority was in a position where it couldn't deliver SANG, could an expansion of the SAM project effectively compensate for that? And then the fourth group was looking at access restriction and control measures. I just said previously about the aim for us to be comprehensive. So I think while some of these options aren't necessarily desirable, or perhaps at first looking might not seem particularly likely to happen, I think that what we wanted to be able to do at the end of the project was to be able to say, look, we have looked at all potential options, and we've been comprehensive in that way. So just going through a very brief summary of the findings, and just pulling out, I think, some of the key points. You'll see that there is RAG scoring next to each of the options. So the green options are recommended to be taken forward as potential mitigation measures. The amber ones have potential, but it's not recommended that they're pursued at this time. And the red are not currently considered to have potential of mitigation. So the first option was looking at SANG networks. There was found to be evidence to support this option. The idea being that are there opportunities to deliver circular walks or facilities as a network, and introducing variety in the value of that. There was evidence of effectiveness. There was some, the project report emphasises the need for caution with SANG networks, and it's the same with some of the other options as well, the potential for user conflicts and avoiding that. But it also noted that there is the potential to further expand cross-boundary working that could perhaps extend existing networks, but also allow opportunities for more shared capacity in the future. The next option was looking at the idea of linear SANG. So this is looking at the potential for there and back walks, but also the relationship between delivering a linear SANG that perhaps is just a there and back walk, but how that connects with other SANGs and perhaps a wider network of routes. There was evidence to support this option. Basically, there's evidence of the value of particular high quality, high value linear sites. Again, there's need in terms of caution about how they are designed to avoid them being viewed as too busy and to avoid user conflict. And there is quite a lot in the report talking about the best ways to make these types of sites attractive, particularly to dog walkers, in terms of allowing, it's not necessarily thinking about a linear route being a very narrow path, but about having space either side of that route to allow dogs to exercise freely, as well as perhaps some more narrow parts of it. The third option is looking at recreational routes. So this was an idea that was taken from the strategy used in the New Forest, and it's looking at the option of enhancing or creating recreational routes that are more like footpaths, so enhancing existing public rights of way, perhaps as part of a network, but also just individually in terms of making them attractive routes for people to use. There was found to be limited evidence to support this, other than whether they are, unless they are delivered as part of a SANG network. There was particular concern here about user conflict and sense of business, but also the fact that existing usage of a lot of these routes would be quite high. So the likelihood would be that it would allow very limited additional capacity, even if they were, enhanced with extra facilities or connected in some way. The next set of options, just continuing on for this group, the next two options were looking at the variation in SANG size. So whether there was evidence to support the delivery of smaller SANGs. So this was around either them being less than 2 hectares or around the requirement for the circular walk of the 2.3 kilometres. The project did find that there's evidence to support this option, but that they would likely need to be larger than 2 hectares in order to deliver the features that are required by the SPA user group. There is the potential for smaller SANG to be perhaps delivered as a bolt-on or as part of a SANG network, rather than kind of individually on their own. But it did find that users did value some of these smaller sites, and particularly where they're close to home and convenient to use. And then the final one was looking at larger SANGs. So this was whether there is justification for looking at particularly large SANG or SANGs with a number of facilities that would justify a catchment larger than 5 kilometres. It was found that there was lack of evidence to support this option. There is obviously evidence that people do travel further, and as has been mentioned already at the meeting today, and the project did find that there was some evidence of a wider draw, but the work that was done as part of the project found that this seemed to focus on particular activities, so particularly horse riding and mountain biking, rather than necessarily dog walking. It did find that there could be opportunities, but sites that would come forward to support such a larger catchment are likely to arise infrequently. So if this was to be considered further, really robust site-specific evidence would need to be presented that would justify a larger than 5 kilometre catchment. So the sixth option was looking at habitat restoration on the SPA. So this is based, in simple terms, this is the clearance of forested areas to recreate and manage additional open habitat that would be suitable for breeding SPA birds. We sought legal advice on this because I think the key question was whether this could be considered as mitigation rather than compensation. The legal advice supported that it could be used as a mitigation option, but that habitats would need to be in place with proven benefits in advance of any applications relying on it. So obviously we would need to factor in the financial implications of this, but also, the timing that would be required prior to any mitigation being kind of available for development. There are areas of land which appear to be appropriate within the SPA for this to take place, but as part of the project, we had some landowner discussions, but it was unclear whether suitable land existed. So this is an example of an option that would need, I think, a fair amount more work, and there would need to be more discussions with landowners to understand whether this is feasible or not. The next two options are around access management. It's actually really useful that my presentation follows the presentation that you just had on SAM, and you've obviously seen all the fantastic work that the SAM team are already doing or planning to do. And I think this was really the conclusion of the project. In terms of expansion of SAM wardening, the project found that there was evidence to suggest that, or there is scope to expand, so the potential for more wardens, but there needed to be a lot more work in terms of factoring in additional costs. So it wouldn't just be a matter of more wardens on the ground. Obviously you've got to then take into account other additional costs, vehicles, all those kind of other factors, but also I think the key message was that this would likely still need to function most effectively as part of the mitigation package, so alongside SANG. So the idea that you can effectively deliver, expand the SAM element, to compensate for not delivering SANG, I think is the key issue here. And then in terms of expansion of the education communication element of the project, again, as you've already seen today, there's a lot of expansion that's taking place or already planned. So the project found that it was difficult to define additional measures that would enable quantifiable additional benefits. And therefore, even if we were able to identify those, the additional capacity that we can identify is likely to be very small. So the decision was that there's no benefit really in pursuing this option further. And then the final set of options are looking at options around access restriction and control. So the first option looked at whether there was a way of restricting access by restricting and controlling car parking. The evidence that was collected around car parking for the project found that at peak count there was still significant over provision of car parking around the area. So measures would need to be quite considerable to have a reasonable impact on visitor distribution. But also it was found that it was quite likely that any additional capacity from implementing this measure would be quite minimal. Dog control, the evidence found that there were some control measures could be implemented, but again, this was an option where mitigation benefit would be quite difficult to quantify and would likely be very small. I think also there's quite an overlap here with a lot of the measures that are already in place and a beneficial component of the existing sound project. So again, it was difficult to kind of define perhaps what additional measures could be put in place to provide additional mitigation. And then finally, an option, and I think, as I said, this was really to be comprehensive, was looking at actually, could you be restricting access to parts of or the whole SPA? Obviously, this is potentially difficult to achieve and enforce. The project did look at the potential for measures to restrict some access, and there is evidence of how this is done in other SPA areas. So, ways of physically increasing distance between visitors and birds. But there were found to be insufficient evidence on the success of those potential measures, and also, again, how you define the capacity in terms of mitigation with these measures. So I'll just go on to summarise the project recommendations. So the options that the project considered the project suggested should be considered further were SANG networks, which was on option 1, linear SANG, either as connected to part of a network or independently, and then small SANG, but the emphasis was that these should be delivered primarily as part of a network or bolted on to existing SANG. There's an important point made that these would need to be part of this, the existing approach in terms of the package with SAM. And there were 2 really important recommendations that I want to emphasise. Firstly, that if these alternatives were to be considered, that weight should be given to delivering SANG that meets the existing criteria in the first instance. And only if there are clear reasons and justified reasons why these are not available should these alternative approaches be considered. And then if they are considered, there need to ensure that there's visible equivalence when not meeting the existing criteria, which is a term used in the project report. But basically, we need to demonstrate that they are as effective as delivering a SANG under the existing criteria. And this may need to be done by providing perhaps alternative qualities and features that aren't already required in the existing criteria, a higher provision rate, for example, or demonstrating how it would be effective as part of a wider network. So particularly with a small SANG, that it's its relationship and its context within the wider network that's important. It was considered that there is flexibility in the existing delivery framework to deliver these alternative options. but it was recommended that they would be formalised, that they should be formalised in modified SANG guidelines. And also, I think it concluded by, I suppose, reiterating that whilst looking at this alternative approach might unlock sites that perhaps have had to be discounted in the past, land is still finite. And at some point, some of the alternative options that we considered may need to be reconsidered in the future. And I think that was the idea behind having this sort of RAG scoring with some of those amber options, that, it may be that further work can take place in the future to reconsider those options and see whether they are practical or not. So that's my presentation. As I say, I'm happy to take any questions I am able to answer. I'm sorry if they are a bit technical. I may need to take them away, but I'll do my best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. We'll go first to David.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your presentation. I have to say I'm delighted that this actually supports the principle of SANG. Because I've been around this project ever since it started, and I had this fear that somewhere down the line we'd end up at the point of SANG there being proof. Well, I'll start again. There is no evidence base at the moment that absolutely states that SANG is totally effective. There is a growing anecdotal evidence that is effective, and I hope in the future we'll get to the point where we can prove that it does do what it's supposed to do. So I'm delighted that effectively your proposals support what is already out there, because it would be quite frustrating if something came forward at this stage that kind of undermined it. So thank you very much for that, and yeah, and it's a good direction of travel.
Thanks, David. Marina.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the presentation. I think it's very thorough. I think it's really good. I just got a couple of little questions. I was a little bit concerned about the smaller SANG. On previous page, it sort of says they're 2 hectares. A SANG that's 2 hectares, in my view, I know you're mentioning it could be part of a network. What does a network mean? Is that attaching a SANG to a smaller SANG to a bigger SANG, so you've got a stepping stone to get to 2 SANGs, or what is the network? I didn't quite understand that, because I think 2 hectares is like 2 football pitches or something, and to achieve the I can't remember the word that's jumped out, the essence of a SANG, you need a little bit more space than 2 hectares, I believe. So I was just wondering what you thought of that, Anna.
Yeah, I think that was the point I made about, either bolting on or connecting as part of a network. And my understanding, I'd probably need to go back and look at the evidence in detail, but my understanding is that the recommendation in terms of the network is that there would have to be physical connections to allow people to extend their walk. So if they want to do spend longer at SANG or do a longer walk, that there are physical connections to other SANGs that are perhaps larger, or as I say, it's bolted on to a large SANG, so that they can move on to the adjacent piece of land to extend their time or their walk.
So it's specifically to attach a SANG to a SANG, that network. That's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, so I think it could be, that there's, I suppose, footpath connections rather than it being, physically next to each other. But
they're not just pockets. They're not pockets standalone.
Yeah, and I think that's the point I made at the end about kind of the importance of these would be considered, on a case-by-case basis, and the competent authority in Natural England would need to be content that the context that this smaller SANG is being delivered in is right in terms of it has those connections with other SANG, or relationship with a larger SANG, so that it provides this effective mitigation. That's really important.
Thank you. I just have one more question, Chair, if that's okay.
Please, of course.
The car parking is brilliant and everything, and I know we're in this new green wave electric parking sockets and so on, but there's no mention of cycles. And it may be because people on bicycles don't cycle to a sang to take a walk, because they won't necessarily have their dog with them. But I was just wondering whether there was any evidence, if there is a need to have any cycling facilities or parking facilities for cycles. That was all. It's just I just wondered whether it has been looked at and there is no need, which it probably is the way it is, but it's not been mentioned. That was all.
I'm not aware. I'd need to go back and look at the survey work that was undertaken and probably come back to you on that, Marina, because it may well have been considered. It wasn't something that was pulled out in the project report or in the recommendations that I'm aware of, but it may well have been looked at. So I can
Great,
come back
that's
to you.
super. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
I suspect, Marina, your initial thought was right, in that it's a slightly odd combination, whether if you were to cycle, then you're probably not getting off your bike to then walk.
Yeah,
you're going to stay on the bike. But it might be that it's an odd combination that actually means that it's probably. Anyway,
I noticed on the graphs and the data graphs, there's more
I
people
know what you mean.
going for a walk without a dog. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a valid question, and I'm sure we'll look at that.
Thank you.
Martin, you're up next.
Thank you. I was going to ask about the car parking. I wasn't clear. I presume this refers to car parking at the Sang rather than car parking generally across the SPA.
Sorry, I should have made that clearer. It's looking at controlling car parking around the SPA. So is there a way of restricting car parking to obviously then reduce the number of visitors on the SPA, and whether you could count that as a way of mitigating the impact of new residential development?
Okay, well, that just made me think that we had a kind of experiment whereby charges were put in place on a number of SPA sites, and for a period of several years, and then they were withdrawn. And I wondered whether data was available to show what impact that had, because I know anecdotally, for example, Chobham, the number of people going there dropped quite a lot as a result of the car parking charges. It would just be an interesting thing, because you have some data potentially that could be used to do a full analysis of that. Just a thought.
Point. Thanks, Martin. Anna, I'm sure we'll take a look at that and come back to us if the data is available, which probably most likely. Thank you. James, go ahead.
It was just to pick up on cycling again, not necessarily in the context of Sangs, but certainly in the SPA. On the Borley Valley SPA, there's an awful lot of pressure from mountain bikers. And although Sangs draw dog walkers away from the SPA, we don't actually make any accommodation for mountain bikers. Just an observation. We do have a BMX track in Hart, which is very, very popular and attracts people from as far away as Southampton. It doesn't actually attract mountain bikers, it attracts BMX riders, and it is a different cohort. So I think cycling is an interesting one. If we could create a Sang that attracted cyclists, I think that'd be brilliant. I'm not sure that we can, and we're not required to, so I suspect we won't, but cycling is an interesting pressure on the SPA.
Yeah, thank you, James. You raised some interesting points, actually, in the relationship with cyclists and Sangs and SPAs is not something that I'm particularly familiar with. It's not something I've given a huge amount of thought now I think about it, mainly because I don't think that they're our natural customer, shall we say. But it's probably worth having a slightly deeper look at that and seeing if there is some opportunities there. Something for you to take away, perhaps, Anna.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I would just say the point I made earlier about the larger Sang. I think that was something that did come out of the project, that mountain bikers were the group of users that seemed to be willing to travel further, and to a site that they were particularly attracted to. So if there was the opportunity for a larger Sang that could provide an alternative mountain biking facility, then that definitely, I think, could be something that could be looked at further.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other questions? James, your hand is up, but I assume that's a legacy hand, as you've just
It's a legacy hand. I do
No,
apologise.
no, not at all. I don't see anything else. I'm just going to double check just to make sure. Yep. Okay, in which case, thank you very much, Anna. At this point, we've been going for an hour and a half. Can I suggest we take a short 10-minute comfort break for all our sakes? I find that as we approach the 2-hour mark, the ability to carry on diminishes rapidly. So if it's okay with everyone, can we take a 10-minute break? I don't know if you need to pause the recording. I don't know how it functions.
Hi, Joe here. The YouTube recording, I will now put up a slide explaining what's going on to any members of the public who might be watching on YouTube. But we are still live, so people, if you could remember to mute.
That's very good to know. That's important information right there.
Yeah.
In which case, I will see you all in 20 to 12. Thank you very much. Okay, by my watch, that's 22. I hope we're all back. Yes, I can see people just returning. Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll pick up right where we left off. Our next agenda item is the financial update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So I'm Jenny Wadham. I'm an officer with Hampshire County Council, and we are the administrative body for the partnership. Just for the benefit of the newer members, that's the financial administration that we manage, and hence I've got the financial report here today. I'm also going to introduce the next agenda item which is the investment working group update as well, before handing over to those. But obviously, I'll start with the finance report first. I will try and be as speedy as I can on this one. I'm conscious of time, so I should just pick out the key points and by all means ask questions at the end if you want to. So if I start with the year-end position shown in Appendix 1, and also starting from paragraph 12 onwards of the report. So the Endowment Fund, which is the money that we have set aside to hopefully make investments with, currently has a balance of £14.9 million. Of that, approximately £10 million is actually held in investments. We have just over £700,000 that's accrued from the dividend income to date. And also we have approximately £4 million sitting as a cash balance, which is from the tariff income and also interest income that we've received. Do you need to mention of that £4 million from the tariff income, there is a £3.2 million investment pending, which I will come on to a little bit later. So in reality, that balance will reduce down to 800,000 fairly soon. The actual tariff income for the year just gone was just under £1.8 million, so slightly lower than we were projecting at the November board. And we did see reductions across most localities, particularly Hart and Runnymede, and COVID was a factor in reducing that down. In addition, we received 311k of dividend income. As it notes there, the value of the investments has decreased from the original investment made, and we have Arlen Close coming later to present it fully on that. So I'm not going to touch on it too much here, but I will just mention the way it was set up was always they were long-term investments. And as you know, one of those investments was in property. So Arlen Close did warn us straight from the start that because of the transactional costs, we would expect a reduction in value in the immediate term, and hopefully to recover that as time goes on. The expenditure for the year came in at just under £450,000, and that's just over £100,000 below the projected position. And again, that's the impact of COVID affecting the seasonal staff that have been recruited too. Under the SAM agreement, we take 70% of the tariff income to go into the Endowment Fund, 30% goes to cover the maintenance for the year. And again, in the last financial year, that 30% of the tariff income was sufficient to more than cover actually the annual expenditure. However, as you'll remember, we did take the decision in the November meeting to increase the balance in the maintenance fund from £1 million to £1.5 million. So effectively, we did keep an extra element, if you like, of that tariff income just to increase that budget up as a one-off. If I move on to the projected position for the current financial year and also the following 2 financial years, from paragraph 20 onwards, that's shown in appendices 2 to 4 in a little bit more detail. So again, just as a reminder for the benefit of the newer members of the board, the tariff income was never going to be indefinite, and therefore we had in the original business plan that we wanted to build up a capital sum in the endowment fund that would generate an ongoing investment income that would be able to fund the maintenance of the SAN in perpetuity. That plan was on the basis that we would get a total of £30 million worth of tariff income in over a period of 17 years, and assumed annual expenditure costs of around £500,000 per annum, but rising with inflation each year, so obviously increasing as the time went on. To date, so since the start of the partnership in 2011, we've actually received in around £90 million worth of tariff income. We're expecting to receive a further £3 million this coming financial year and another £3 million in the following 2 years. So we're projecting that we will have total tariff income received of just over £25 million by the end of March 2024. And then we are expecting to get up to that £30 million figure by the 27-28 financial year, with no further tariff income expected after that date. Although obviously we're trying to project forward several years, so that does mean to be taken with a little bit of caution. Even I'd obviously be very rich if I was that good at predicting the future completely accurately. So I think what we can take from that is reassurance that the position is looking to be in line with the original plan, but obviously just bearing in mind that it is a projection. The next section of the report from paragraph 30, it's just to remind you about the investment of the cash balance held within the Endowment Fund. And obviously this was in recognition that the amount of bank interest we will earn on the cash balance is not likely to be sufficient to cover the annual expenditure in perpetuity. So under the terms of the agreement, it's the board that has the responsibility to review the performance of the value in the endowment fund on a regular basis, and to give instructions as to any investments to be made after having taken advice of the independent financial advisors. And as you know, we appointed Arlene Close as financial advisors a few years back. And that was really it on the finance report. So I will pause for any questions that there may be now.
David, go ahead.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny, for the tables and the annexes probably make easier reading than the text. But a question I did have: the fees for SANG have been uprated with inflation over time, whereas the SAM charge has remained unchanged. And at our last meeting, there was a proposal that should be uprated. It makes good sense. And I wondered where we are with the various councils in arriving at that conclusion.
Yeah, so I think that's what obviously Natural England were leading on the review of the tariff income, and I think there was a proposal that was agreed at the last board to actually update the tariff income charged, and the action was for the individual local planning authorities to try and implement that as soon as possible. And I think there was the recognition that people had I'm going to lose the technical term that you're supposed to have, but they needed to implement their plans. They had set dates for updating the plans before they could actually make those changes. But it should be taking place over these next few months if it hasn't been already across the planning authorities.
Good news, thank you.
And it's one that we do as a reminder. Obviously, each planning authority sends us in a return with the details of their tariff income, and we do just issue a reminder to let them know, or to ask if that has been implemented and updated.
Thanks for reminding us of that, David. That was, I remember discussing that last time around. Thank you very much. Angus, go ahead, please.
It's the same subject, Chairman, but I just wonder who really is responsible for ensuring that all the councils have implemented that. I know my own council has. I checked just yesterday, but it may well not be Hampshire's responsibility to do that, but I feel somebody should be checking that we're all on the same page with that.
It's like me. so I sent the tariff uplift letter out in November. And I have sought confirmation that it's being applied across all of the local authorities. I have written confirmation from quite a few, but not from everybody. And I wonder if that's because people are quite busy. I think, as Jenny quite rightly points out, over the next few months, we will find, I think, that we're going to be receiving the uplift in the tariff. But you're absolutely right, I will check. And if anybody isn't, then I will flag it and then we'll figure out what we're going to do.
So in answer to your question, Angus, it's Ruth with an oversized cricket bat is Susan Jones.
I'll go and smile at them or something, but I'm sure we'll make it work.
Perhaps, Chairman, we could just have a yes/no report, as it were, at the next meeting, just to confirm.
I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah,
if we could have a note of who's keeping up and who's perhaps fallen a little behind for various reasons, and
actually,
we can
yes,
take that away.
if I was able to contact everybody and say, for the next meeting, we want this information, and then they'll know. Good plan. I'll do that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
The reason, Mr. Chairman, I raised it is I could not see this increase in RBWM's fees and charges. But I'm going to go now. I know that they should be doing it. I should go back and tell the team that's what's got to happen.
Perfect. Thanks very much. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Jonathan, go ahead.
On that last point about waiting until the next meeting, the next meeting is in quite a long time. I think it's November at the moment. I think if we're coming across any borough or district that's having problems, as it were, releasing its funds, if I can put that in the nicest possible terms, we need a system whereby reminders are done long before we have the next meeting, actually. So as long as we're able to do that, that would be a better way forward, rather than wait for the next meeting and everybody jumps on one council that hasn't done anything. It's not the right way to do it. Okay.
No, I think I take that on board, Jonathan. I suspect, and I don't want to put words into Ruth's mouth, but I suspect that Ruth handles the regular requests and updates internally. I think what we were suggesting is that we have a sort of a list of councils and their positions at the next meeting, not that we only take action at the next meeting. But Ruth, why don't you tell us how you intend to handle it?
Well, I think it'd be really useful for me to be able to go back to all of the authorities and say the question has been raised. So won't you please enable me to report that you have increased the tariff?
That's a very gentle way of doing it.
And then if anybody doesn't respond to that, I'll start to get a bit cross.
Yes, and if you keep us, if that is an issue, then perhaps, we have representation from everyone involved. So perhaps if you ping us a quick email, then we can assist.
That'd be great. That's right. Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
Is that okay, Jonathan?
That sounds better.
Excellent. I agree. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to move on to the investment working group update.
Okay, so I think this is back to me just to introduce on behalf of the investment working group, and then I'm sure the members will want to contribute after that. So just a very quick reminder, actually, that the investment working group was set up to review and recommend actions in relation to the investments, recommend actions to the board to agree in relation to the investments. The current membership is set out in paragraph 19 there of the report. The investment strategy statement is included within Appendix 1, easy for me to say, but just to summarise those broad principles there in paragraph 21. So it was agreed to keep a balance of now £1.5 million in the maintenance fund to ensure that we could cover the annual expenditure should tariff income take a dip in any particular year, or dividend income, for example, not be that high. Again, to keep the risk as low as possible whilst ensuring it was sufficient to meet the expenditure. So what was deemed a sensible risk. And just to highlight as well, the target return of 2 to 3% above inflation was considered to be appropriate. As I put there, the cash balances paid by the administrative body are currently 0.1%. So it was very much recognised that that's not going to be enough to give us the sufficient income to cover the annual expenditure once the tariff income ceases. At the last meeting, the board meeting, the investment working group was asked to review and propose a new paragraph relating to the impact on the environment when making the investments. And as you'll see from later in the report, the investment working group have drafted a new responsible investing policy for discussion, which is included as an appendix 2 of that report. And I'm sure they will want to talk through that a little bit more in detail in a moment. Just to move on to paragraph 29 onwards, sorry, not 29. Oh, yes, it is 29. Sorry, I can't see my report properly. 29 onwards in relation to the investments that have been made, and just an update of what we have so far. So an original investment was agreed of £6 million, which was made back in 2018. I think early 2019 as well. At the last board, it was agreed that a further £7.4 million would be made in investments following the presentation from Marlin Close. Of those, 4.2 million has been made, but that 3.2 million in relation to the CCLA Diversified Income Fund is still pending. And I think this is one that demonstrates what we mentioned a bit later from paragraph 40 onwards in the report about the practical limitations of making those investments. And as you know, Thames Basin Heath, it's not a separate legal entity in its own right. So in order to get round that, what we do is Hampshire County Council makes those investments on behalf of the JSPB in accordance with your instructions. But what that does mean is that we're subject to the limitations of what HCC are able to do and when we can do it as well. And in the case of this particular investment, it's a new type of investment scheme for Hampshire, basically. So there's been an awful lot of paperwork involved, as well as a lot of questions going backwards and forwards between our investment and borrowing team, our legal team, and also CLA as well. Not to mention just the sheer practicalities of obtaining all the necessary signatures at the right times when we're in the current situation and everybody working from home. But yeah, I think it's just a timely reminder, if we like, of how it's a vehicle to get round the problem we have of the JSPB not being a separate legal entity, but there are some practical considerations that come with that. That said, the teams are pulling out all the stops to try and get that investment made as soon as possible, and it gives you reassurance. HCC are also looking to invest in that that fund as well. So it's both of the investments we're trying to get done. Just want to jump back then in the report to the updated cash flow forecast from paragraphs 34 onwards, and this is where we look at the projected balances that would be available in the Endowment Fund for potential investment. So just looking at table 1 there, the first 2 lines are the projected income for the next few years, which then gives rise to the balances that you'll see in the bottom half of that table. So at the moment, we've got just over £1.5 million in the Endowment Fund, and we're expecting that to rise to just over £4.7 million by the end of the current financial year, so by March 2022. The report then goes on to look at the projections going further a lot forward. So at the very end of the report in the appendices, we've got a number of graphs that look at various scenarios with potential dividend returns. So again, a word of caution, we're looking forward 60, 70, 80 years in those. So it is very much an educated estimate of where we might be. But as you'll see from that, if we just take a 2% inflation with a 4% dividend return, the money would be there for the period that we've deemed to be in perpetuity, which was 80 years from the start of the partnership. But the capital fund would start to be depleted from 2083, 84. So it's not going to go on for forevermore with those returns, but it does go for a significant amount of time. However, in that modelling, if inflation were to be higher than the 2% or the dividend returns would be lower than the 4%, that's the point where we start to see the money running out before that in perpetuity period ends. And that's just something to consider in relation to the investment strategy. And as I mentioned in the broad principles, it had been set at 2 to 3% above inflation as a target rate of return. And that's why, because of this modelling. And I think that is quite enough from me. So I will hand over to any of the members of the investment working group who will no doubt want to expand on some of those points, particularly the responsible investing policy.
Thank you, Jenny. I think we've probably head to Jonathan.
Thank you. It's not a legacy hand. My first point I've written down is I'd like to thank Jenny, and I'm sure you all feel the same, on the tireless work that she has done, keeping us all together through an extremely difficult year. She has been absolutely brilliant, and we're very lucky to have her. I'd also like to thank David Hinton, who does have quite a financial brain on him, who comes in with really good ideas from time to time, which we normally take on board. And obviously we'd like to welcome you now to this. And I think there's somebody else whose name I can't remember. My own approach to this in terms of advice, if I'm allowed to give it, is that the aim of this was really to get money out of cash. Remember that, was to get it out of cash, because cash was basically a non-starter, and we have got absolutely no idea what's going to happen to interest rates or inflation in the years to come, but we can look at that from time to time. And then in order to start the investing, we didn't want to take chances either. So, I mean, I've been through this with a fine tooth comb, and it keeps reiterating. We want to basically take the minimum risk possible, because I can imagine, let's say, when one or two of us old sweats leave this hallowed committee, because we can't stay in forever. That's David. Okay. People come in with business acumen, and they all want to start saying, well, why don't we start putting some of this into Bitcoin? And that actually is a quote from one of our meetings. Okay. So we just have to guard against that. It's our job is to keep an eye on what's going on, and we leave it up to the professionals to give the advice. I'll stop there for the moment.
I was muted. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll pass over to David.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. I have to leave in about 5 or 6 minutes, so I did want to talk about the first of all, two things. Is I'd like to thank Jenny, who is always there. If you have a question, you get an answer, and the cash flow projections that she puts forward are very helpful for the group to see the sorts of decisions that they're making. But I did want to touch briefly on the responsible investment policy. I wrote this rather, I have to say, I plagiarized this particular report, because I sit on the Berkshire Pension Fund, and we obviously need a policy of our own. And I'd like to thank Greg from Arling Close, who actually made some changes to it, which made it, I think, a workable policy. I think the investment industry is spending more time looking at responsible investing than it is in how it's going to gain revenues from the investments that it's actually making. This is a big industry. We cannot, it's right and proper that we have a responsible investment strategy that says exactly what we think, but we cannot direct those managers who invest on our behalf to do things that we might actually like them to do. But what I would say is that irrespective of any views, there is a massive move in pension funds and other investors that is pushing investment managers in a particular direction, and those investment managers are pushing companies across the world to take on board climate change directive that came out of Paris. And so I think that we, as a relatively small investor, we have are sitting on the shirt tails of a massive move that's taking the whole world into a different direction. So the document that's presented here, I suggested we should present it to members, and then have members come back and make any comments, so that we can look at it again, because this may not cover off, I think it was Martin Darcy's concerns, but it's about the best that we can do given the authorities and, if you like, leverage that we have with the investment managers that we work with. And I'm sure that Greg, in a short while, will explain that too. So at that particular point, and I won't take questions because I think this is something best taken offline, I'm going to leave the meeting, but I thank Greg, who you have yet to meet, and for all of the work that he has done in getting us to a point where we have some investments, I think, in the right places, delivering returns, and I think those returns will be good going forward. So, Mr. Chairman, I apologise, I have to leave.
No, quite understood. Thank you very much, David, and thank you for all your contributions, both at the working group and here. Thank you. And I'm going to pass over to Martin, who your hand shot up and then went back down again. But before I do that, if I may, as the newest member of the working group, I'd like to make a couple of comments. It's very important to bear in mind the purpose of this investment and the nature of the investment. And I appreciate, certainly, even from my perspective, there's a very strong desire to align the objectives of the project in its entirety with its investment strategy. I completely agree with that. But the appetite for risk and our willingness to expose ourselves to the emerging world of green investments and everything else has to be tempered by the realities, which is that the right and proper investment strategy is for the longevity of this project, and that cannot and should not be jeopardized with any attempt to play the markets or to expose ourselves to unknown risks. Now, I know this is going to sound a little odd coming from perhaps a Liberal Democrat or a staunch Green supporter, but that's the nature of the beast. We're not here to make money. That's not the purpose of our investment strategy. We're not trying to generate revenue or to set ourselves up for a nice little nest egg. It's a responsible investment for the longevity of the project. That's I just like to highlight that, and that certainly came across when I attended the investment working group, and I think I wholeheartedly endorse the current responsible investment strategy that's been set out. Martin, go ahead. I know you've got a couple of things you'd like to throw in at this point.
I would, yeah. When I was at school, I remember being taught in our ethics classes that the end never justifies the means. So basically, it's important to bear in mind that while our end is hugely beneficial, we can't justify investing in damaging, environmentally damaging or morally damaging investments just because our end is good. So that's really crucial. The second thing I would say is that I'm not happy with some of the wording because I think as is always the case with council documents, there's always a little wiggle room left, or well, not a little, a lot of wiggle room. So we say things like, where possible, reducing investments in products such as fossil fuels. Well, not where possible. We should just be just getting rid of them. I mean, there's no question that we say where possible. But when you say where possible, that means obviously if it's not possible, you can't do it. Fair enough. So you don't need to say it. Absolutely. You can't do the impossible, can you? So why put where possible in? I mean, it makes no sense. But there are quite a few other bits where there's a little bit of sort of, yeah, maybe we'll do it if we can, or, you know, we don't want to lose any money doing it. No, you don't want to lose any money doing it. Of course you don't, but you shouldn't be doing it. That's the fundamental point. We can't justify investing in fossil fuels or in weapons. I couldn't believe when I read that. Controversial weapons that have an indiscriminate, disproportionate impact. And what? Are you for real? Are we actually putting money into those? No, I'm sorry, that's unacceptable.
No, I understand where you're coming from, Martin, and I certainly don't disagree with what you're saying. I think it's a much more practical approach, which is that we're not suggesting we seek out and wriggle our way through the wording to go and invest in those things. But the reality of investment portfolios and the type of investment we do is that we have a manager that handles the day-to-day running of that fund. And if we were to suggest a micromanagement style that exempted investments in a whole range of topics that we might consider harmful to nature or environmentally unfriendly, or et cetera, then we are severely limiting our opportunity to maintain the fund and extend the longevity of the project, and that's the trade-off. So I'm not. It's not that I necessarily disagree with you, and I appreciate that your viewpoint about the ends don't justify the means. But we have to be honest about what you're asking, and I'm not sure we have the full support of every member of this board to pursue that and accept that as an end result that we're willing to live with. And therein lies my struggle with a lot of this topic, is that I think the world is changing and that there is a shift towards greener investments, but I don't think it should be the responsibility of boards like this and investment funds like this to be the driver behind that change.
Can I just follow up? with one point, which is that the only reason that that pressure exists, the pressure that is forcing the whole financial industry towards responsible investment, the only reason that exists is because groups like us put that pressure on. And if we stand back and say, do you know what, they'll do it by themselves, they won't.
But we're not suggesting that. We're not suggesting that. What we have proposed is where possible. And that hence the wording is where possible. I think there's a slight irony here that you and I probably are far closer in our opinion on this than perhaps this conversation would suggest. But I'll open it up. Just have a couple of other people come in. Marina, let's hear from you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Darcy makes some very good comments. I'm on page 233 of the document, item number 3, listed priorities. And climate change is number one, first bullet point priority, choosing investments where the managers recognise and manage the risks and opportunities investments face from climate change. It would be great if there could be more clarity in that wording, that it is more of a stronger priority that this group in particular, the Thames Basin group in particular, really is very clear that we do recognise that we are here for the ecosystem. One of the third priority in that section does mention, where possible, reducing investments in products such as fossil fuels, controversial weapons that have an indiscriminate and disproportional impact on civilian populations, tobacco and alcohol. Now, like Councillor Darcy mentions, that is the third priority, which is quite disappointing. It says where possible. I would like to see that put further down the list as a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. I think certainly that's something we can look at. I'm just trying to find the relevant. So, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Any other comments? I get the sense that perhaps there is a little discomfort with the current wording, but certainly, other than the usage of the phrase "where possible," which I think is perhaps, I suspect we're slightly putting a little too much emphasis on that wording. It's pretty common wording in terms of trying to set out strategies for investment strategies. Where possible, I suspect that there's two interpretations happening here. One, which is that we're suggesting that that's been left in as a means to wiggle out of certain obligations or directions. But I certainly interpreted it as, well, the realities of investment funds, which tend to have hundreds of instruments, sometimes even more instruments in a package. And if 999 are perfectly acceptable and one is not, then does that mean that should be discounted? And there has to be a judgment call. Now, of course, if that one happens to be some sort of, landmines or some well, that's not a good example because these are legally not allowed, but some sort of manner in which might be an oil company in there, does that discount the whole fund? Apologies, I have my news. Okay, thank you. Yes, well, hi to you too. Sorry, I've got a new puppy, 4 months old. So I think there's a matter of really now. Apologies. There's a certain interpretation. I'm going to go to Jenny and then Jonathan. Go ahead, Jenny.
So I'll just unmute myself. Yeah, just a couple of things. Obviously, you'll hear me say very many times that Hampshire can't give financial investment advice, so I will try to steer well clear of that. But just if it provides any reassurance, we will have Greg coming to give us a presentation next, and he will wax lyrical on this subject. I won't say any more on that. But the other thing is the investments that we're making, because it's done as HCC as agent, these are all funds that we are investing in as well. So it does also confirm with Hampshire County Council's responsible investment policy, because we are making very similar investments. The other side, as I'm sure Greg will talk through, is that the reason for putting in the where possible was so that we are not forced to sell some of the investments that we've got at a potential loss and be a forced sale of investments. So it was around, as you say, giving us the wriggle room but I think it was to avoid it being used in extreme circumstances, to force a sale or to limit what we could invest in, as the chair has explained very eloquently, I think actually, and better than I could ever do. So that was all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. That's a really good point, actually. And one that something happens if a particular fund changes its investment portfolio that we're invested in, and it introduces a new item that you perhaps don't agree with, and suddenly you're forced to sell. There's some serious penalty clauses associated with that, depending on what can happen. So it's a fluid world. I just want to try and I'm trying to convince you, Martin, and certainly Marina, that it's not a matter of trying to wiggle out or absolve ourselves of the responsibility, which I feel very strongly. It's instead to make sure that we're protected against changing circumstances. Jonathan, why don't you come in on this?
This will remain a constant dilemma, okay? Can I just say, I actually, one of my other duties, I sit on the local government pension scheme fund panel, and I currently am a substitute on the ESG panel, and hopefully we'll be going back onto it when we rotate. So I'm as passionate about keeping things clean as the next person, okay? And of course, I'm not giving advice here, but the important thing about what we've got in front of us, it will remain a living document. This is not the last time we're going to see it. We will basically improve it as things go on, especially if, for example, the Paris Accord strengthens itself, especially if America starts, as it is, gets more involved in greener issues and running its own affairs. The county councils all over the country are doing the same. They've all got ESG groups, because if they don't, they'll be in trouble. And we all know that the finance houses basically are going to be under compliance. They'll be checked out, they'll be graded. They will be told, you've gone from grade 1 to grade 4 because you're just not doing your job properly, and they don't want to lose business. It will also help those companies that are refusing to change their work methods. If nobody invests in them, they'll be forced to start changing their work methods. And that's how things happen. Now, we're not going to be investing in China or anything, but you know, the Chinese thing is a fascinating one, because governance is the big, social side of it is a really big one, okay? But nobody's avoiding China in terms of investment at the moment. I don't think we need to get bogged down in this. I'd like to hear from Arlene Close.
I think that's a probably good suggestion. I hope that some of the words have allayed the concerns of some of the members. I'm hoping that the next presentation will actually, shed some light on some of the more technical elements of it, if that's okay with everyone. Unless I feel obliged to give Martin and Marina a right of reply. That you've heard a sort of a retort, but I think it's fair and just that you perhaps state your current position, just so we're for fairness. Oh, you don't have to.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair. It's Marina. I totally understand what Councillor Glenn's saying. I there's no guarantees, and it's there for wriggle room. However, I would like to see the climate change first bullet point priority to have more substance in the direction of choosing the investments. I don't think it's directive enough. So that we're clear that this is our main priority, that we want to really invest in companies that are tackling climate change and the repercussions of climate change, and we are supporting companies or businesses of that ilk. I don't think it comes through strong enough on the first bullet point of climate change. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marina. And Martin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
I think my argument about the possible is kind of a pedantic one, which is that I think with the word possible, the opposite of possible is impossible. You don't need to say possible, because if it's impossible, you can't do it. So it's just redundant. What I would say is, where practicable, it might be a more useful way of expressing it. And I would, rather than reducing investments, it should be eliminating. Because we're not seeking to reduce the number of investments in fossil fuels, we're seeking to eliminate them. I appreciate we can't do it immediately, it takes time, but in the long run, that would be the direction of travel, I would think. And also that we should make some statement to that effect, that the direction of travel is to have an entirely guilt-free set of investments. That's what we want. That's what we aspire to. That's what I would want in that statement.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Jonathan, did you want to come in again? Oh, legacy hand. Shall I leave it? Okay. In which case, what we're going to do now is we're going to exclude the public, exclusion of the public and the press. I move that the press and the public be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of item 8, financial advisor's presentation, as it involves a likely disclosure of exempt information relating to financial and business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holder information, as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do I have the consent of the board to do that? I don't see any dissent to it, so I'll take that as a yes, in which case, can we stop the recording and exclude any press from our ranks? I'm not